Lead Time is a podcast of the Unite Leadership Collective, hosted by Tim Allman and Jack Caliberg. Lead Time taps into biblical wisdom for practical solutions to today's burning issues. Each podcast confronts real-time struggles facing the local church in a post-Christian culture. Step into the action with the ULC at uniteleadership.org. This is Lead Time.
Happy day. Welcome to Lead Time. Tim Allman here with Jack Caliberg. It is a beautiful day here in Gilbert, Arizona. I pray wherever you are. It's been actually a little overcast here the last couple of days, which is unusual in Arizona. I love it, but Jack, you were saying it makes you feel a little sleepy.
Yeah, cozy. That's probably the way to do it. And when I'm cozy, I get sleepy.
Well, let's not bring the cozy, comfortable. Let's bring the passionate energy that our guest today.
That's right.
Dr. Mary Scott. Dr. Mary Scott is with us today. She is the current CEO at the Lutheran High School of Orange County, California, one of the flagship Lutheran high schools. And she also has experience as the head of school for 5 years at Concordia International School in Shanghai, China. And before that, over 2 decades of experience at Concordia University in Irvine, California. So you have seen the church and seen institutional leadership at a variety of different levels. We can talk about Irvine. I think a lot of our listeners are very familiar with what Concordia Irvine, the amazing institution that Concordia Irvine is. But tell us about your time in Shanghai, and even just a little bit about your family and where you've lived over the years there. It's good to have you, Dr. Scott.
Thanks, Tim and Jack. It's I'm honored to be here and spend a few moments with you. I actually was raised in the Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod. I went to elementary school and high school in Chicago. And then I went to Concordia River Forest, and my first call was in Queens, New York.
Wow.
And then came out to Christ College when it was very small, about 350 students, and was blessed to serve there for many years. And then we went to Shanghai, and that was a wonderful opportunity for our family. I had been working internationally with Concordia Irvine, developing some programs in Asia and China specifically, and a few things in Africa. And so the natural move for us to see if we could live overseas became available at the right time for our family. I'm married. We have 2 older daughters and a 17-year-old high school junior, Anna, who we adopted from China. So that was a natural fit for us to explore the opportunity for her to get to know more of her birth country. And we loved it, and highly recommend as we can fill the church at large, the church around the world, with Christians to go share the gospel. It was a wonderful opportunity and experience for us.
I love it. So what are your primary responsibilities now as CEO at Orange Lutheran?
So I oversee all the aspects of Orange Lutheran, basically the strategic plan. And, my goal is always to help the leaders execute the plan that we have in a meaningful way. I'm looking at the organization today. We came in 2020, which was a challenging year to enter into leadership and ministry in a school in Southern California. But now we're able to focus on the future and what that looks like to build a sustainable ministry over time, where we can unabashedly share our Christ-centeredness in a place that is also a refuge for students and families from the world around them.
Mm. Do you have a lot of international students at Lutheran High there in Orange?
Orange Lutheran used to have about 65 to 70 international students out of about 1,300 students. When COVID hit, we have not fully rebounded for that, so we have about 35 right now. Our goal is to move that forward, and in fact, yesterday we just hired a new full-time international recruitment officer. Over time, we'd love to see about 10% of the student population be international students. brings a richness to the community, and it's a valuable experience for some students who will never travel outside of the country to meet someone from outside of the country and get to know them and build a relationship with them.
I think a lot of times being in Arizona, which historically has been a slightly more conservative state, and then, a lot of people coming here from California and from other, many would say are more liberal or progressive states here within the United States of America. What's it look like to lead a very conservative Christian university at Concordia Irvine? And then what are some of the unique challenges and opportunities and of being a part of a confessing institution like Orange Lutheran?
Well, to be honest with you, I think if we remember ourselves to be followers of Christ first,
yes.
Before we remember ourselves to be Lutheran, that really helps in terms of understanding, sharing the gospel in ways in which we can relate to the community and the culture and yet stand apart faithfully, knowing that God equips us to do so. I tell the story, this is what shaped my thinking around this. When I was in college many years ago, my dad and I had the opportunity to travel to meet friends who were missionaries in Papua New Guinea. And at the time, I was in the church work classes and the education classes and training for all of that. And it was, very focused on Lutheranism and a deep understanding, which I value and appreciate so much. And then I went to this mission field for 6 weeks, and there I saw the people that the Lutherans and the Baptists and the Catholics and the Methodists were all working with to share the gospel. And I understood differently how we can bring who we are as Lutherans into the experience, but what we're doing is trying to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Yes. And that crosses denominational boundaries, and we can rest on the confidence that the Holy Spirit is working in the lives of the people there. So that was transformative for me to really kind of go from totally Lutheran elementary school, high school, college, and really understanding that deep, rich history, which is fantastic, but then seeing it applied in different ways out in a mission field, and that shaped me for my ministry today.
When did you start to form a passion for education? Was it even, before adulthood? What did that look like for you, that emergent calling towards education?
Well, I love kids. And so I was always active in high school. I was a big sister in downtown Chicago, and in college I did that. I taught Sunday school. I did the typical, church growth pattern of just by being active and being volunteering in those areas. When I applied to colleges, I kind of veered away. When you're thinking in high school, I'm not going to be in Lutheran teaching or, anything. I wanted to be a marine biologist, or then I thought I wanted to coach Division I, and I actually had the opportunity to do that for a year. Wow. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. So that was eye-opening. So it was, pretty early on that I just felt like I enjoyed having the opportunity to spend it with students and with people.
It's so good when you're living in your sweet spot, Mary,
yeah.
and make a career on something that just fills you up, provides for your family, but it's not a job, it's a calling. And vision for the future and the growth of any organization flows from that deep sense of purpose and mission and calling that you obviously have. So what are your big visions right now at Orange Lutheran?
Well, we just bought a building in June that's about 1.5 miles from the campus, and it's about a 60,000 square foot building. It's commercially leased right now, and we have a 0 to 5 year plan of moving offices over there to create more space on the main campus for students. And then we have a 5 to 10 year plan of creating programs that would allow us to populate the part of the property or all of the property over time. And then, we felt like 10 years from now, we can assess how's enrollment going, what do we need, and either, lease the property more space or sell it or, retrench. And so, our vision is really to look at education in the traditional way and the non-traditional way. So what I like to talk about at Orange Lutheran is our ministry, because we have a thriving thrift shop for the community that really, really is well known around the area and creates a source of revenue for our financial aid for our students. We have, not on campus, but we have an ICE Academy. And so the ICE Academy is with leased space where the Anaheim Ducks used to practice. And there we offer opportunity for students to take classes on campus and then shuttle them over to the ICE Academy for practice or coaching or individual lessons. We're looking at building a first responders academy to attract students who are interested in police, firefighting, in those areas. Wow. So we're really looking at education holistically and in some non-traditional ways. Orange Lutheran started a fully online program 20 years ago, really ahead of any of the curves in high school. And we are using that as a foundational backbone for some of the work we're doing now around blended education. So we want to point people to Jesus, and the more students we can grasp in this area and trust in how God is working in their lives, the better it is for everybody.
That thrift store that you mentioned, is there a connection with students there, or is that just kind of like a separate autonomous thing?
No, students serve there, and then families serve there as well. And so, we have long-time faithful people who have been serving the thrift shop for the 25 years that it's been open every day. And then we have families who plug in, 3 hours or 6 hours. And so it's really run almost exclusively. We have 1.5 full-time employees. All the rest is volunteer.
Wow. That's really cool.
So good. So good. Gosh, there's so many directions we can go here. I'm gonna go to the values question. I think leaders have a well-articulated understanding of who they are, who they aren't, and then their deep core, you could say, principles or values. Do you have any of those that are really shaping you personally and or the values that kind of norm the way Orange Lutheran functions?
Well, so for a long time I've used my confirmation verse as my vision verse, Psalm, and so I kind of focus on that. But lately, I've been working on a vision statement, and it's really pointing people to Jesus through educational excellence in a loving, caring environment. And I just think those three things embrace, what I would want to be about, or what I'd like to see as a legacy from my career, whatever I was doing, whether I was coaching or teaching or administrating or whatever. Hopefully, that's what people will see.
Do you have mission, vision, and values for Orange Lutheran that you really stick to? I mean, a lot of organizations, we went through kind of a rebrand here at Christ Greenfield 4 or 5 years ago. And so a mission statement, values, and then kind of our vision, 20 campuses in 20 years. This is something we're talking about and praying our team is both a school and church kind of owning consistently. How do you speak about mission and values at Orange Lutheran?
So mission drives Orange Lutheran and what we've done, and it's to help students internalize the gospel message of found only in Jesus Christ. And so since I've been here, that's been the mission and the mission statement. It was a statement that was adopted probably 15, 20 years ago. It's a statement that people love and embrace. And Orange Lutheran has a 50-year history. And so one of the things that's kind of interesting coming in and new is tapping into that history and making sure we honor that, but also not let it hold us back. And so we've been using that mission statement. I highlighted it. It's what we do. And so it's part of what we've held on to, and there's not been any kind of push to change it from anybody, myself included. I think it incorporates nicely a broad vision of ministry. The vision we've been working through And I did some visioning sessions with the staff last year to think about, hear from them what their vision is for the organization, those who are been here for 30 years and those who are brand new. And some nice consistencies came out in that. The first one that was across the board was Christ-centered. Orange Lutheran is Christ-centered and will remain Christ-centered. And then we talked about providing transformational experiences because so much of what we do happens inside and outside of the classroom, and we want to continue to do that. And we really looked at the phrase "to serve," and thinking through what does it mean to prepare. There's a lot of thought about preparing people for leadership. You hear that through it all, which is fantastic. But today we kind of hung ourselves on how can we prepare servants who serve wherever they go. They're servant leaders, they're servant mayors, they're servant businessmen and women, they're servant teachers, and what does that look like for us to provide? So we're unpacking that a little bit, and then once we kind of craft that vision for the future, we'll dig into our values. So we're kind of stepping through the process. Post-COVID, we started to do the work in this area.
That's awesome. Thank you. Do you happen in your role to do much hiring?
So we have a great HR department that works through it. I do hire the final interview for all faculty members, and then some significant staff member hires. So I don't have to do every single one because we hire a lot of part-time people in and out. We have 1,400 students and total FTE of about 330 employees. So I love our HR department because they do that churn, especially coaches go in and out. But I do hire the faculty and some staff members.
Wouldn't leading an organization be easier if it weren't for some of the people? Just kind of sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard, Mary. No, we're here I'm being silly, but we're here to serve and at any time leading, because we're, you had 300 some FTEs, we're 70, we're, at fourth or third that size, but you still have one or two or five, kind of personnel issues going on at any given time. And underperformance is a real thing. You'd much rather pull people back who are like overly driven than kind of try to pull people forward into a hard work ethic, understanding where the organization is and all of that. And sometimes we just kind of miss, and you do the best you can to put them in the right seat on the bus, use Jim Collins and all of that. But how do you work with underperforming? Think of the employee that's like, they just tricked you, I guess. I don't know what else to say. You thought you were getting someone who was a little bit more, self-motivated, driven. They understood their why. They had a good sense of self, but then they get in the organization. It's just like, whoa, my bad. So how do you work with that person in a godly way?
Yeah, I had a leader, mentor of mine, Dr. Ray Halm, tell me, the best part of a leadership is working with people. And then he said, and the worst part is working with people. And so, so he kind of framed it for me as a young administrator and working through that. My background is in athletics and coaching, a lot of time in that. And I have a phrase that I have lots of phrases. I try not to use them all the time, but this one I've used here and tried to establish with our team is you're either coaching people up or you're coaching them out. No one should be sitting neutral, right? And so everyone, you're talking to them or you're working with them on and helping them. You're coaching them up. Like how are they going to get better? How many more reps do they need? Where do they need to start? Whatever that is, you're coaching them up. If I have a leader at a high level, I actually want my top leaders at a higher level, right? Because that's who I'm surrounding myself with to continue to challenge myself and everything else. But you could also be coaching them out. And sometimes coaching them out means out of a slump, right? Out of a downturn, out of a time when their spouse has lost a job or has cancer or whatever. So you're really trying to coach them out of that. Or you're coaching them out of that role and you're thinking, I got to get them ready for a different role because it's just not working here. or you're coaching them out of the organization. And I think, those are hard conversations to have. But a term that I learned years ago was something called carefrontation. And so you're having a caring conversation of, hey, this is not working, and rather than let you sit in this and everybody begins to see it, because I care for you, I'm going to have this conversation with you. And they're hard, but if the person delivering the conversation can remember, I'm doing this because I love this person, or I like them, or I love this organization and this person's not fitting in, and I care about that, I will be able to have the conversation. So when
a person is truly serving in their calling, right, their strengths are aligned with their job, and their job is giving them energy and purpose and meaning, right? And so, obviously there's stress that comes with life and personal challenges that people have, but generally speaking, when they're in the right role, it's a role that energizes them. Mm-hmm. And like you said, sometimes they may be in the wrong role. Sometimes they may be the square peg in the round hole. And that's not a judgment even on that person's character, right? And so you're showing kindness. This is a phrase from Dave Ramsey: clarity is kindness, right? When you're helping to bring awareness about that and give them the proper leadership to move into a different role. And I love how you said that sometimes it could be even within the same organization. I've had that experience myself, where a person in a certain role, it's like, not only is it not working, it's causing damage, but then you shift them over there and it's like unbelievable. This person has just exploded and has been such a blessing there because it was such a different role and that person really needed to be over there. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's so good. One final thing to add on the underperforming employee, it's a shorter leash to figure out the right spot if it's a character integrity issue. Mm-hmm. It's a much longer journey to do everything you can if they have the heart of Christ, they want to serve, they're just not in the right spot, and you need to move them. That conversation, I think, for us is kind of senior level. Like, we want to be very sensitive to treat people super well. There anything else to add to that, Mary?
Well, I think that, honoring the work that they have done for the organization, even as you're repositioning people, I think is a really important step. God leads us through different, I had many different roles at the university as the university grew and changed, and some I did better than others. And so, trying to figure out, to the point of where is the sweet spot. But in the end of the day, sometimes releasing the person it hurts at the time, but it's the thing that allows them to take a step back and figure out where God is leading them next in that space. And in the end, I've always found that fascinating to watch as people go, even if we've asked them to go and where the Lord uses them at the next layer. But it hurts at the time. I mean, we've made some difficult decisions at Orange Lutheran for some longer term employees, and boy, it was hard. And yet honoring the person for what they've done and recognizing and celebrating that, and then letting them move into other directions where they can flourish is fantastic for everyone involved.
If it's not hard, you got to check your heart, right? You're in it for the wrong reasons, because we're in this because we care about people. We care about our students. We care about those we're doing life with, those that are partners on our teams, and we also care about, at the end of the day, what's most important for those that we're serving within our churches and our schools. So it's a unique dance. Let's pivot a little bit to talk about women. I don't really like talking race. I don't like talking gender. I think it's ridiculous. I think, men have certain general gifts, women have certain general gifts, but we're all fearfully and wonderfully uniquely made to do a variety of different things within the church and the school. And so what's been your journey as a female leader within these high-level organizations? Because unfortunately, I think it is unfortunate in Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, there are not that many Dr. Mary Scotts serving at high levels within our institutions. And I'd love to hear your evolution and whatever you'd like to share about being a female leader within our church body.
Yeah, well, thanks. I think some days people are kind of happy there's not that many Dr. Mary Scotts, but for the most part, I think it's pretty positive overall. I went to college at Concordia. Well, I went to high school at Lutheran North in Chicago, and I was involved in athletics and in choir and, different things that you do. And in that blend of leaders, I had women leaders as coaches. When I went into college, I had women instructors and women leaders as coaches. And so in those roles, when I look back over my life, I always ended up being a captain, right, of a team, like somewhere along the way. And so I kind of fell into natural leadership ability. I went into, teaching and got to eventually to Christ College at the time and then Concordia University. And there, I had male leaders who said, "You're a leader." They had to kind of pull me in and ask me to participate in this and to be a leader. I remember the day that I was asked to become a vice president because somebody else was retiring, and at the time I kind of argued with the president. I said, "I don't know anything about this part of the university. Here's what I know about this part of the university." Everyone's so frustrated with it. They can't stand working in the office, right? And he said, "Yeah, that's why we need you to be in there. You can help create that environment for it." So I am forever indebted for male leaders in the church who said, "Come alongside and be a part of this." I think I owned my leadership late in my career. I think I was always a leader, but it was like kind of processing through because it kind of didn't fit, right? I was Lutheran and in the LCMS, and I knew there was a cap of leadership abilities, according to church policy and sometimes in my opinion, according to church politics. And so, so I knew there was so it didn't fit, but eventually over time, I realized, okay, this is how God has gifted me, and I love this, and I'm going to get better at it, and keep growing and develop those skills over time. But in my doctoral program, I think one of the reasons there's not that many women leaders, I learned a phrase in my doctoral program that said, "When I look up, can I see myself?" And that phrase has stuck with me because when you look up the chain, like when you look up the organizational chart, do you see somebody like you? And in the Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod leadership, I don't. But as a high school kid, as a college kid, I did. So I saw that leadership ability. And some of my sadder days in ministry are when I hear of young women in the Lutheran Church leaving to go to other denominational bodies or to go to other spaces because they feel that ceiling so limiting for them, and they just don't care to be a part of it. I've always recognized it was there, and I've always felt like, okay, well, God's going to use me as much as He's going to use me. And are there times when I think, well, yes, if I was a man, I could have more or do more, and yet that's not where God has called me, and I don't need more. He's given me everything that I can imagine with a family and a home and travel and all those things. So,
yeah, I hear you really embracing that kind of abundance mindset. God's hardwired me this way. And, whether you're a male or a female, I think the devil's always going to say there's a lid, there's a ceiling, no matter what it is. We eventually, women and men, you have this limiting belief that says, I'm kind of stuck here. And the reality is, no, you can continue to grow. You can persevere. It's that glass ceiling. It can be busted through no matter what. And I think that we would do well in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod to embrace the unique gifts of women and men, within the home. And so let's just talk gender roles. When I was going to the seminary a lot, I I heard a lot about the rationale of order of creation for being what kind of says, hey, the man is the leader and the woman is the helper. I've heard this recently. I've even preached on this from Genesis chapter 2 that the helper, the root of that word helper for Eve to Adam was more of a kind adversary than it was necessarily just one who's kind of subservient or underneath. That is, he was using his gifts, glorifying God in the image of God. He needed a complementary image bearer who was in the midst of this guy thinking he had it all figured out. She would be complementary and the kind adversary, the partner in this core relationship with which is husband to wife and wife to husband for the sake of the family. And then those principles in general are why we've put together some of these hierarchical, male dominant structures within our church. And I just think we need to have more conversation about the complementary nature between women and men, both in the home and in our respective institutions. So have you ever heard that kind of kind adversary perspective of the complementary helper, Mary?
Yes, I have. And I've actually used that in some presentations in the church. And then I've been told that I could never give those presentations. So I think
Why?
In
I'm sorry,
Genesis
just pause right
2,
there. Why were you told you couldn't give those presentations?
Because that doesn't align with what we want to talk about in terms of leadership, right? That's the place where it kind of breaks apart. And Genesis 2 tells you that you are a son of the king, and it tells me that I'm a daughter of the king.
That's right.
That's what it tells me, right? And so,
and the priesthood of all believers is not gender specific.
Yeah, for sure. But if I could, I want to just tell this story because it so embeds for me the conversation that we should push forward. I was at a meeting in St. Louis, and at the end of the meeting, this was a few years ago, I was sitting at dinner with a well-seasoned leader in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and a young pastoral leader, both leaders in the Missouri Synod. And so we were talking about our families. We were getting to know each other and, the different things that we do. And the seasoned leader, the experienced leader, probably my age now, but at the time seemed older. And so he commented about how, his family and now his sons are older and his daughter, and they're all involved in the church, and how he was so thankful because his wife was his partner in that, and he was always so busy studying or serving the church or whatever, and so it worked really well for his wife to help out with the kids and really take care of the home and do all those things. And then this young pastoral leader said one of the things he struggles with all the time is he's on the road all the time. He's traveling all the time for his role, and how he kind of misses out on his kids' development and wanted to be at home more, but his calling was this, and so he had to do that. So, I sat there and listened to this for a while, and then I just said, guys, I love the conversation we're having. I'm having a hard time with saying that women are not influential over the spiritual life of people. In fact, you're putting these women in charge of the most important people of your life when you're on the road and you're traveling and they're saying prayers and leading at night with their kids or talking to them when they come home from school about Jesus. And why would we not want to honor that role in a broader capacity? And that pretty much quieted the conversation. We just started eating after that. That was like, and so I'm just like amazed at, and how that works. And my husband and I, we share responsibilities of things. He's also a professor, and and he is the spiritual leader. We lead a Bible study. He leads a Bible study in our home that I show up at, and most of the time I do the readings for it. But in that capacity, I count on him to help me. But I also challenge him. Well, what about this? And think about this area. So we share the duties, and he saw in me, and he continues to see in me probably more leadership than I see in myself. And that's part of what he loves about me. And so he lets me go. And, he is, to use the phrase, the wind beneath my wings or whatever. And I absolutely love and adore and respect him as my husband and a father to our kids. So it's when it works, it's beautiful.
Jesus models this type of leadership, and what are we called as his people, women and men within the church? We're the bride of Christ, and he doesn't take the high place, Philippians 2. He takes the low place, even to the point of death, to elevate us as his image bearers. And so that we get a vision of Christ's love for the church. Ephesians 5, when a husband honors and elevates and doesn't lord over or demand or lead, impatiently, or yet we see Jesus when a husband elevates the unique gifts of his bride and calls out the gifts of his kids. Like that's it. It's not, yes, there is leadership, and I've been challenged on, well, there's always going to be hierarchy. It's just like, okay, fine. Yeah, we need leaders, and we need to know kind of who's in charge, and we have titles and things that kind of position, and that's good and decent. That's orderly. It's just, do we have the heart of Christ? Are we here for the power and the position, the prestige, the money? Or do we say, I exist at the highest level to be the chief servant? And this hierarchy, it's an inverted pyramid. I really, the higher I go, the more I realize I'm at the bottom and need the wider body of Christ to use all of her gifts. Anything to add there, Mary or Jack?
No, I love the inverted pyramid example, and I think that works over time. We begin to honor who all the team is around us. I worked for 5 presidents at the university, and all of them had different gifts and skills. And I remember Dr. Kurt Krieger and I used to laugh. We would be like, okay, our secret to leadership is to hire people better than us and smarter than us and empower them to go,
really good.
And to serve. And I do think that's true. It's like what engages me is watching leaders lead and do well, and encouraging them and supporting them and helping accomplish the goal.
Yeah, I guess in my life, Tim, I've gotten familiar with female leadership. So I've served in the military under females many times, right? And had come to learn that there can be fantastic female and terrible female leaders. Like you see that in men and women. So, gender should not be the thing, in most cases that's defining what leadership is. We here at Christ Greenfield, we've been very intentional about the labels and the titles that we give to do as much as possible to keep leadership open for women. So in most cases, you're not hearing us calling leaders elders, for example. We just call them leaders, right? Because we want it to be open for men and women to serve, and they can serve at the highest level of our organization, which would be, in our case, our board of directors. So they can serve in my role as an executive director. They can serve on a board of directors role. And so, I like the fact that we're in an organization that opens up as much leadership opportunities for women as possible. I think it's very, very healthy.
Let's do a final pivot coming down the home stretch here, Mary. We are all mostly lifers. Jack, you're kind of a late in lifer to the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And that's great. We love you. And but Mary, you and I have been in this tribe for our entire lives. I'm a 3rd generation LCMS pastor, and I will unabashedly say I am not thrilled with the trajectory and a lot of the narrative about the present and the future of our synod. We have amazing people that we should steward very, very well right now, and all of our leaders, from district presidents to synodical presidents, need to lead from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, from a place of release and surrender rather than a place of control and power. So you and I were at this gathering, kind of mostly white, middle-aged men. I think you were one of a handful of women who were there at this, and it just is what it is, right? I know you've been in those rooms many, many times, and we were dreaming about new dreams for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So what was that experience like for you, and what are your hopeful outcomes?
Well, I think, I love the fact that the meeting was held. And I think that is a really positive step in the right direction. I love the fact that there were 3 women invited to the meeting, or at least who attended. There might have been 10 invited, but 3 who attended. And I love the fact that people of color were also present in the meeting. And so I think that part was encouraging for me. So I would say, if this makes sense, it was neutrally encouraging. Because in the meeting, I think it was hard, and I pointed out, language matters. And, some of the language that we used were always around our brothers in Christ. And I think one of the more discouraging parts of the meeting was the report of how some of the other meetings went. And I think our meeting and our group of people probably ended up with more language around opening up things and discussing different items than the report of some of the other, I don't know if they were districts or sectional meetings or whatever. So I think that was discouraging to hear, that there wasn't some more groundswell around change in other areas besides should we do contemporary music or traditional, right? So that was one of those things. It's like, gosh, I kept thinking to myself, when we hear that, we're talking about people already inside the church. And I keep thinking about, how do we get people outside the church to know about Jesus? And then they may come into the church. They may not come into any church, but they may come into that. Overall, though, I felt like it was a good experience, positive in terms of, and I used this phrase at this session, a bigger table with more people seated around it. And we can't be afraid of differences. We can't be afraid of, Jack, I love the fact that you are not a 16th generation Lutheran, right? I love that. And I would want you at my table, right, to tell me something about your experience. When my husband and I were married, he was not raised Lutheran, and he didn't attend a Lutheran church, and he did join in membership at the church that I was at. And then he has continually, for all the years we've been married, referred to himself as a missionary to the Lutheran Church to help us remember what it's like to not have Lutherans, right? And to be speaking into the church from a very much a faith-based perspective, but non-Lutheran. And I think that we just always, in those sessions, we need to remember those who are not yet part of a church, or those who do not yet know Jesus as a personal friend and savior. That's who we want to be having our focus about, in my mind. And it's kind of a both and, but I did feel encouraged, but a bit discouraged that I think we're talking internally too much.
Yeah, so I agree. I have been at many of these gatherings, and one of my big, I guess, observations is it's really hard for an almost 200-year church body with all of its institutions and bylaws and, different districts and kind of cultures. It's really hard for a group across kind of the spectrum of who we are in the LCMS to execute. So we talk and we don't execute. The follow-up from meetings like this, and I'd love to gather. I love gathering people, but like if there's not this strong pull toward execution and running experiments to reach the lost, to build, measure, learn with a lot of humility, all for the sake of local institutions like our high schools and then local congregations, I don't have a lot of, I want to stay engaged to the wider thing, but unless it's based on the local church going in mission to make Jesus known, I don't know what we're doing. I don't think it's being faithful to the church. We're not fulfilling our call as the body of Christ if it's based on these kind of institutional positions of power rather than what the local church needs. I guess that's the biggest thing I could summarize, that there's a ceiling as it relates to how leaders, what types of leaders, and then how leaders are developed within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod that say it's expensive, it's institutional, and I don't know any other way to interpret this kind of power control struggle than saying it's about institutional preservation rather than the needs of a local congregation in the midst of a secular America today, where we need to look back to look forward. So any other response to either that or what would your, because we can go negative. It's really easy for me to go down the negative path, and I think Mary, you could do that too. But maybe a closing question on this: look at the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod with semi-rose-colored glasses a decade from now, say 2032. What would you hope we look like?
Well, I would say, just the demographics would be different. That we would embrace people of all walks of life and all colors. That we would find a way to disciple people. A number of years ago, we were in Africa and we were in Ethiopia, and we met with the bishop of the Ethiopian Lutheran Church. And my husband asked him, well, as we're leaving, what can we pray for you for? And the bishop said, well, you can pray for us. We do not know how to disciple 5 million members. And I thought to myself, we don't either, right? And I would love that we did, right? I would love that would be our challenge as a Lutheran Church, that how do we disciple so many people who are coming to know Jesus, and how do we help them in their walk?
Yeah. From disciple maker, I mean, for that trajectory to change, Dr. Scott, it has to move from disciple maker to disciple multiplier. That if you are receiving word and sacrament, you are being trained to train others, to discover, develop, and deploy other disciples within your local context, to identify more and more evangelists who are there within our context who can train others to do the same. So yes, I agree. Disciple makers and disciple multipliers. Anything else that you would see for our future 10 years or so from now?
Well, I would love to have the synod in general say, listen, our goal is to grow X amount of people. And now go. Congregations, schools, a small house churches, a homeschool populations with it. Now go. Come to us, come forward with ideas and what's going to work in your area and what's going to work where you're from. My mind, you asked what question you didn't ask me. In a whole nother section on how do we train church workers, right? We could do a whole session on that.
Maybe we will next time.
I know. Well, it would be interesting to get a panel, right? But I love the institution that we have. And first of all, I love the theology that we have, but the model is broken. Yeah. And so it's like the structures that we have, fine, but the model is broken and we need to really revisit that in my
Mary, there's a fascinating study that was done about doing mission work in communities. And I'm trying to remember the name of the report. But they had something they called the Dawn ratio, which said that, in order to saturate a community with the gospel, you needed at least one person preaching for every 500 people in that community. So we look at, the Phoenix metro area, and we did some math, and we said, okay, yeah, we need 10,000 preachers here. So is the synod ready to prepare us with 10,000 preachers? And if the answer is no, then what can they do to help us locally do that, take on that responsibility?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Mary, we're just getting to know each other, but that is my heart's call. It's why I was put on planet Earth, is to multiply disciples and to dream about new ways to replicate pastors and every type of leader, women and men, for gospel multiplication. And I couldn't agree with you more. Our models are based in a Western higher ed model. It's not based on the rapid multiplication that we saw within the early church, and even in the Reformation church. Luther was fighting against a lot of bishops and popes who were kind of lording over them ordination and other roles within the church. You can't do that. And Luther says, and the Reformers said, nah, I think the power of the office of the keys has been given to the church locally. So we'd love for you to be a part of this, to bless it. But if not, we have to do what it takes, what it takes to multiply disciples here. And unfortunately, right now in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, I hear a lot of our higher level leaders trying to enforce certain ways of behaving and training through policy and bylaw rather than relationship, and it's falling on deaf ears. If you don't understand our context, if you don't understand what we're about, then God bless you, but we're going to need to explore different ways to multiply leaders, which if you go to uniteleadership.org, you will experience some of the ways that we're looking to multiply disciples. And one other shout out, we've been writing blogs for the ULC, uniteleadership.org, for a long period of time. And if you scroll to the very top, I took my thesis, which was the traits and characteristics of pastors who collaborate in mission, Dr. Scott, and I took it and I condensed it into 3 kind of longer form blogs based on leadership development. And I'd love to get your feedback and honestly have you back next time, because it'd be a whole lot of fun to talk about how we could do this differently in this culture in which we do life together today. So I know you have many other things, and I know I probably let you down because we didn't ask all the questions we should have, but this was a lot of fun, Dr. Scott. If people want to connect with you, how can they do so?
Well, the easiest way to get a hold of me is just to email me. And that's mary.scott@lhsoc.org. That's the email address I check every day. And so they can do that. I'm happy. Thank you. I'm honored to be a part of that. I do think the future of the Lutheran Church is bright. I think because we have a history of innovative Lutheran Hour ministries and innovative programs that we have done, and we need to refresh those and bring those forward again. And I think that the time is ripe to be able to do that here in the United States and around the world.
Mic drop, Dr. Scott. Thank you so much for being with us today. You have blessed us. I love the joy of Jesus that rests upon you. And this is Lead Time. Sharing is caring. Please like, subscribe, comment wherever it is that you are receiving this. And we are honored to be bringing wonderful, wonderful leaders, mostly within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, to have conversations that can help shape our future so that we would not just be about defensive preservation, but we would be about multiplying disciples and multiplying churches and leaders so that the gospel, the light of Christ, goes forth into every dark crevice within our culture. This is our call for such a time as this. Jesus loves you. We love you too. And we'll see you next week on Lead Time. Peace of the Lord. Thanks, Jack.
God bless.
Thanks, Mary.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lead Time, a podcast of the Unite Leadership Collective. The ULC consults and brings together cohorts of congregations to build the culture, systems, and structures of intentional discipleship multiplication. To go deeper with us, create a free login on uniteleadership.org for access to exclusive materials and resources. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for next week's episode.